Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Namaste and welcome everyone to today's talk by Rachna ji. So this is a talk hosted by Institute for Indic Wisdom, and today's talk will be on Indic perspectives on human development and eternal parikrama. So before we start the proceedings, let me introduce the panelists for today. We have today's speaker, Rachna Bhangaonkar. She is an assistant professor and acting chair at the Department of Human Development and Family Studies at the Maharaja Sayaji Rao University of Baroda. And her research interests include cultural psychology, Indian perspectives on moral development, including concepts of dharma, karma yoga, and shraddha, youth civic engagement, and Gandhian philosophy. Two of her recent cross-cultural projects are about traditional and modern eating patterns and work-life balance. She has been the recipient of the Fulbright Junior Research Fellowship at the University of Chicago and has participated in Fulbright Nehru International Education Administration Seminar as well. She has received several national and international research funding from Indian Council of Social Science Research, ICSSR, Indian Council of Philosophical Research, University Grants Commission, New Delhi, Indic Academy, that is now Indica, German Research Foundation, and ICSSR Japan, Japan Society for the Promotion of Science. We extend a welcome to you, Rachna ji. Namaste and welcome. And also we have with us Raghu Anantanarayanan, who is the co-founder of Institute of Indic Wisdom. Raghu Anantanarayanan is an alumnus of IIT Madras, and he's a behavioral scientist, yoga teacher, and an author. His central quest has been the inquiry how to continually look within, transform, be the best, and inspire. This seeking led to discipleship with Yogacharya Krishnamacharya, dialoguing with J. Krishnamurti, and collaborating with Professor Pulin K. Garg. He has dedicated his life to the study and application of yogic traditions to guide the inner transformation of individuals and shape leadership and culture building of organizations. He has pioneered the use of Yoga Sutras, traditional theater, and the Mahabharata in experiential learning. Raghu Anantanarayan ji has authored many books. The latest books, some of his latest books are The 5 Seats of Power, Discovering the Best You Can Be Through the Mahabharata, and Antaranga Yoga, The Foundation of Indian Psychology. Raghu has co-founded Sumedhas, Academy of Human Context, the Barefoot Academy of Governance, the Center for Consciousness Studies and Inner Transformation, as well as Ritambara Ashram. Raghu is based in Kotagiri, India, and he's present with us today. And we welcome you as well, Raghuji. And I hand it over to Raghuji and Rachnaji from here on. They will take it forward.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amit.
Thank you.
Okay, Rachna. So let me just give a slight background and then I'll ask you the first question. I think I was introduced to you by Anand Paranjapeji, which in itself is a great honor, nah?
Yes,
With the kind of work he's done and all of that. So that was a very, very auspicious beginning. And I've been following many of your papers and your work since then, and we've had a lot of dialogues. One of the critical questions for me is what made you shift from, most Indians who have been through psychology, who got degrees and all that, are forced to study what is called universal psychology, but is actually European American psychology.
Right.
And then you've made the shift, which is, from my point of view, extremely good. But we'd like to hear your perspective on it, how you came upon it, and so on. And then we will look at some of the work you've done. Yeah, so over to you, Rachna.
Right. Thank you, Raghuji. I think the auspiciousness continues, and I'm very, very thankful to Indica for arranging this talk and reaching out to me, and couldn't have been a better host or somebody who is asking questions to me. And I think this is a very important milestone for me personally. I also welcome all the attendees today. I know there's a Cricket World Cup match going on, and
Oh,
so,
yes.
thank you very much for sparing time, and I hope to make it worth your time, if not more, than what's going on in Chennai currently. So before I respond to your question, Raghuji, I would like to thank all my gurus. I think this would not have been possible without their blessings and guidance. And I got married into a family which follows the Dattatreya Guru Parampara, which basically Dattatreya himself had 24 gurus, including the earth, the water, and a number of other beings. And I think some of my gurus have been very, very kind. Some have been hills, some have been rivers, some have held me in love, and some have made it difficult for me so that I learn what I needed to learn. So in a lot of Kritagyata and with that bhava, I think I am making myself vulnerable here, and with their guidance, sharing my journey. And I think I would not really say that I moved to Indic worldviews or Indic psychology, but I think I was very, very privileged to have been studying at an institute and also working there, which had always deeply questioned this received view. So, even when I was an undergraduate student, a master's student, there was a lot of, a sub-statement below the number of theories that we learned to say that, this is not all there is. And I think that the seeds that were sown at that time were very important. And I would also like to make a distinction here, because I'm not a psychologist, which means that although we draw heavily as human developmentalists from the field of developmental psychology, we are also an applied and interdisciplinary field in home science, which is popularly home economics. And because of the applied nature, interdisciplinary and applied nature of the discipline, we had a lot of exposure to lived realities and real lives of people. And so the misfits with the Euro-American content that we learned in theory were pretty evident. And of course, we had teachers and mentors who also said that there is more to human development than this. So I'm really, really grateful for that. However, I would also like to say that the context was really not conducive for indigenous and Indic thought to be mainstreamed as such, or to be put as parallel to this. And so perhaps they remained in two different isolated compartments. And the good thing was that as students, we were often left with a lot of questions. And those questions really paved the way for our curiosities to do things ahead. And so I think I would really be very grateful to my predecessors. And in one of my chapters about the history of the field, I have also mentioned how in the 70s and the 80s, there was a deep critique of, say, the Kohlbergian perspective. As well as in our theorization, we were learning about Carol Gilligan's work, Nancy Chodoro's work, which questioned Kohlbergian views or the androcentric male perspective in psychology. So I think that introduction was very, very important to say or to reiterate that one could and should question. So that was very important. I was also very much drawn to the work of Jyotsna Vasudev, who again questioned Kohlbergian points of view. And as a second-year student in my undergraduate days, I remember also being fascinated by model development theory. And so I think somehow the pieces just fell together, and I decided to do my doctoral work on model development in India. And the other important thing is also that the department had a program of visitors and a very important renowned psychologists, cross-cultural psychologists who would visit the department, share their work, look into our curriculum. So I think those open windows really helped. Most of them were very appreciative of our program of field interventions and training students in real life settings. So I think there is a lot of scope even today for me to weave in the Indic perspectives very strongly into the curriculum and my teaching. So I think the move has been, it was perhaps just waiting to happen. And I would like to share an incident soon after my doctoral, during my doctoral viva. So I had gone to the US under the Fulbright Fellowship and worked with Professor Rick Schwader, understood his theory, and he has devoted so much of his life's work in India and has been instrumental in broadening the Euro-American view about model psychology. And I think that's a valid contribution, because he actually came here, stayed, brought his students. And I think his explanation of dharma was very intense and very true and honest. Not that there were no Indian scholars who had written about it. Of course, Dr. Durganand Sinha and a lot of others had also written. But like I said, the context is very important. What enables the mainstreaming is very important. So once I returned from the US, I also changed my doctoral project to focus more on dharma, ideas of dharma, and look at intergenerational socialization and stuff like that. However, the first question in my Viva Voce exam, which was conducted by Professor Girishwar Mishra, and none other than Professor Girishwar Mishra. And so he said, well, your entire work is about dharma, but you have not used that word in your title. Why is that? And I was stumped. I will be very, very honest here. I had done all my work. The dissertation was shortlisted for an international award. Everything was done and dusted, but I was simply stumped. And that question, the Viva was over, but that question really stayed with me to say that what was there in me, in spite of all of these factors, that did not allow me to embrace this word and use it, And I remember having discussions about the title with my guide, and we wanted to represent theory and this and that. And so, I mean, it was nobody's fault, but it was really just not done. And so I think that was a turning point as well. And I kind of wrote another paper, which is pretty well cited and popular even today, about lay person's perspectives of dharma and karma. And I think I would also like to narrate my exasperation, if you will, when I started reviewing literature for what is dharma, what is karma. So, the lay people's perspectives would come in with the data, but what theory did I have? And I was using what was available in psychology, but there was this little worm in my head which said, no, also look into history and anthropology and this and that. And it took me a good 2 years just to make any sense out of this huge, sometimes also contradictory set of views about this really multifaceted concept. And so I think that was the point it was a tipping point to just go gung-ho into it. So I think, it also brought out a lot of gaps in my own understanding. So say, for example, when I was in the American context and people would have questions about caste, and I would be kind of on wobbly ground, if you will. So, those were questions that I think were resolved, one through this paper and another through much of your work. So before perhaps Professor Paranjpe introduced me to you, I had written a long email after listening to a talk by
Oh,
you.
yes, I remember.
So I was thrilled to get a response, which was so dense, and it was like literally like rain on parched earth. So that was very helpful. And of course, then I also did a lot of engagement with Indic materials that became more and more available in recent times. I was also I during the pandemic, I did a course from Bori, the Bhandarkar Orientalist. Yeah,
Rachna,
sorry,
just a moment, Rachna.
Yeah.
See, one of the things might be useful to elaborate, no?
Right.
Is how are you seeing dharma? Because very often people confuse the word dharma with religion.
Correct.
Which it is not.
Right.
They also forget that actually people like Piaget actually wrote a lot about religion in a pseudonym, because when he tried to speak about it, he was attacked.
Right.
And then his was a very, very interesting take. He actually critiqued the way things were looked at, and then he brought it in very quietly, according to Anandji, into his work on child development and cognitive. And he has a story to say about Skinner also. Yeah, and we don't have these in our history. There is no religion versus science.
Correct.
And all that. And also, what is the difference between the word moral and the word dharma? I think it'll help.
Yes.
And why are we importing a binary which is not native to our thought?
Right. Yeah. I think my engagement with a lot of Indian materials has basically removed all of these. I mean, how we are trained to also think in binaries in psychology. And yes, I think the first point of disagreement is that dharma is religion. And when you tie up the moral and the religion, I think you're not doing justice to the concept at all. So when I was writing another chapter on dharma, I think this became very, very clear, and I had to articulate it in a certain manner, because again, when you have a wide audience, it's people who don't know the origins are most likely to misinterpret that. And yes, if you go to the root of the term dharma, and of course, with your help and guidance, I've understood it better. It means to hold, to sustain, to, as a system, a harmonious system. And I think there couldn't be a more enlivening world for human development than the idea of dharma, which basically means how do we learn to be who we are and live with others together in peace and harmony, such that the system works in a well-oiled kind of a fashion. And I think if we bring in religion, and also I think particularly certain understandings of Hinduism, I think it truncates the entire process of inquiry. And I think it's very, very important for us to understand that Indic views are not Hindu views. What is a Hindu view is also something that we need to engage with. I mean, if you look at the history of this land, the civilization, I think we would be doing a disservice to its greatness if we are just going to limit the understanding of dharma to religion. Or, I mean, I have also great discomfort in the term moral, because, the social and the moral and the personal are not just watertight compartments in India anymore. And that was one of my major findings in my doctoral work. So I think this understanding also builds with time, with more and more engagement. But yes, I think we don't want to repeat the mistakes of keeping dharma as religion and then tying ourselves into knots, which is again a very colonized way of looking at our heritage.
That's
And
right.
if we don't engage with it, I mean, if you're still going to engage with it in a colonized manner, then you're going to be back to square one. None of this is going to help. So I think that's my very humble submission, to say that know your own, make the effort. And I think as seekers of knowledge, something is waiting out there, something very exciting to be, unearthed in your own journeys. So yeah, thank you for that great question.
Yeah, you were on talking about Bori there, so I just kind of brought you back.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. But I think the pandemic was very helpful to me, because I finished a couple of very good courses which told us about, there was this course on Indian heritage, huge course on different, right from archaeology to architecture to psychology, well-being, family life, fantastic course. And I would recommend to people, if they really want to know it in a, Indian heritage in a nutshell, I think that course helped me immensely to also not just know about the roots of our culture and living, but also perhaps places that I hadn't thought of traveling to. I think now I will, because, some temples, some places, flora, fauna, all of it. Also, we did, a couple of us from the department, we did a course on, offered by Chinmaya Vishwavidyalaya on the darshanas. The philosophical elements, and I think that was a fantastic, very well curated course. And if it is still available on YouTube, I think that is very helpful, just to build a worldview and understand how deep our questions were, and how advanced and how relevant they are even today. So that was that. And of course, a course with you on the Yoga Sutras was fantastic, because I think it also helped me engage with the text a lot. And so brick by brick, I'm still in the process and building a greater understanding of it. But yes, in terms of human development, there is a lot that needs to be done in the field with these perspectives. So yeah, over to you, Raghuji.
I just want you to build on this, your research into this idea of dharma and human development, because I think when, you also talked about colonization and things like that, no?
Right.
For example, my grandmother's criticism of my mother was that I was brought up on Benjamin Spock. Yeah. So my grandmother used to laugh at my mother, saying, "Why are you not listening to her and her mother? Why are you reading this American book?" So I think a lot of understandings of human development are treated as though they're universal, when they're actually very, very culturally oriented.
Right.
And also, even meanings of words, right? Because all the Indian languages are verb-based, and they have a completely different cosmos that you're, referring to. I think there's a huge problem when people refer to something which is titled as universal when it isn't. Yeah.
Right.
And development that is studied from that perspective. So it'll help if you can elaborate that particular thing.
Yeah, I think I'll first take on this problem of stuff coming in from outside head on. So, we have this very common practice of massaging infants when they are young.
Correct.
That's a grandmother's recipe. We've all done it.
I was also massaged, thank God.
Yes. So, it was only so I was helping a German professor collect some data, and she observed how a child, 3-year-old, 4-year-old child, is able to get on a two-wheeler, and so she said, "Oh my God, these children!" And it was a very common kind of observation that she had, to say that children here are able to climb on these vehicles so easily. And so she was, of course, an expert working with infants across cultures. And so she could make those connections. And she said that something is happening in the first 3 months of life, which is perhaps, setting the foundation for some of these later developments to happen. And like that, there are so many other instances. Our attachment with not just the mother, but aunts and grandmothers and uncles and what have you. So, those kinds of elements in our everyday life that have not been adequately studied, because we have a superstructure of what is attachment, and we unfortunately have not been able to theorize about some of these things. And I think that is a big area where we can really do systematic studies. We also have developmental assessment tools for infants, which have been developed in India, standardized in India. And I think there's a lot that can be done there. So how does this one particular practice, children who have this exposure and those who don't, some of these things. So I think I would like to make 2 points, especially to professionals in the field. One is the rigor in research. I think that is something that if we have to question knowledge that's coming from outside and, kind of counter it with something that is so grounded in our reality, we need to be super duper rigorous in our research. And the second is also that take it to a level of theorization, even if it's a small study, but if it is done rigorously, I think it has a story to tell. And that is what I would encourage a lot of young scholars, because what also happens, and this is my personal observation in the field, is that we are neither psychology nor a truly interdisciplinary field, and that leaves our research in a rather stagnant stage. And so there is a lot of work happening across home science colleges and human development departments in India, but I think we need to tighten our research and build our capacities in that. And there has been work on infant assessment and all of that in the department in the 50s. So, I don't think in this day and age we have an excuse for standardizing some of the things. There's some very promising work also coming up between Ayurveda and other
I was just going to ask you, how are you relating it to Ayurveda? Because Ayurveda has its own theory.
Absolutely.
Human development, and this theory is very deeply connected with the samskaras, like we were talking the other day.
Right.
So there is a very comprehensive theory already there.
Yeah.
So if you can expand a little bit on that and maybe research opportunities there, it might help people who are listening.
Right. I think Ayurveda in itself is highly specialized. So I think we need to get together and collaborate with some of these Ayurvedic Vaidyas and doctors. That's one way of approaching it. Another way is also to look at folk lay people's practices, how they're raising their children. And this doesn't necessarily have to happen only in Hindu families. Do it in different communities. I think there is a severe lack of well-documented ethnographic work in different communities, including tribal communities, other communities, lower socioeconomic classes. A lot can be done, and then the theorization will be built, bit by bit. But yes, I think with the Ayurvedic doctors, other traditional healers, and people from other traditions of medicine, I think we need to put it all together to be able to explain and understand, because also the idea of samskaras just almost always gets thrown away because, it's traditional, it's not applicable anymore. But I think in essence, some of it is. And if it's time to renew some of its essence, or I think we should begin a dialogue. I think the time is right.
I'm going to ask you a slightly provocative question, Rachna.
Yeah.
See, one is just a quick comment on what you said. For example, in the Indian tradition, the yogic tradition, you have different names for the fetus.
Right.
There's a time when it's called a Dauhridi, the mother. Yeah. It's medically accurate.
Right.
We have a samskara at that time to help the mother understand what to eat, how to behave, so that the new heart that is developing has the right context to develop in. and
Right.
so on. So that was
Right.
just struck me.
Right.
The other thing I'm going to ask you is this, na? It's, I mean, I know this from talking to old Vaidyas. The Kumbh Mela and all these big melas, na? There's a mela that happened used to happen
Right.
in Kumbhakonam in the south and things like that. These were not just times when people came and bathed in the Ganges. There used to be sadhas, which means gatherings. People from tribal areas would meet people who are traditional Vaidyas and so on in that particular field, I'm saying, exchange ideas and talk about new herbs that the tribes were using, or these people would transfer knowledge. They would even exchange seeds. They would exchange, you know, I mean, most people don't know that having these little plants, which they think is Japanese.
The bonsai. The bonsai.
Bonsai actually started with Ayurvedic people because they needed to have all these herbs in their backyard. Right. So handing over some bonsai so that it can, because it loses power if it is only a bonsai, no? So these kind of exchanges apparently used to happen in this place. Yeah. And somewhere, I think 30 years back or so, when Dharampalji was alive, we had 2 or 3 of these big exchanges. Yeah. One in Chennai, an engineering college, one in IIT Bombay. What if you revive these meetings where you invite these people, honor them for their knowledge into university contexts and hold a mela?
Yeah, I think that's
like these old people used to do. Why don't, what would help, or what would prevent something like this from happening?
Well, I think rampant ignorance would prevent it from happening, because we just don't know. I mean, I didn't know this, honestly. And so I think one is to also know that there are these possibilities available. And then even in a small way, if we can build regionally or locally some of these people coming together, discussing it. Because, you know, I think the problem also with academia is to look at something which is modern and going to come in the future. Like, you know, everybody is totally hung up on artificial intelligence, whereas what we need is how to develop real intelligence in this day and age. And so I think that perspective also needs to shift quite a bit. And so in that sense, I think knowing that some of these things are possible. I know somebody who had started a Hunar network, which basically brought people who had these kinds of indigenous knowledge, like about herbs and seeds and stuff like that, and have them interact with doctors and all. So this was like a retreat thing happening. And I don't know what happened to it afterwards, but there is a possibility. But I think if we do it in more informal settings where people voluntarily come together, I think it would be much, much more fruitful, and it will, you know, take more shape and kind of flourish rather than in a very restricted, structured context. So yeah, huge, immense possibilities there.
Have you had any interaction with the Dai system? Because there was a friend of mine who actually studied Dr. Girija. She's done a lot of work in Ayurveda. She's done work with the Dai system, and how much they know, you know, traditionally, both about childbirth and about infant care.
Right.
Have there been any attempts to reach out to that cross-section of knowledge holders and work with them?
If I'm not mistaken, I had read of studies when I was a graduate student, a master's student, that there were government programs which basically trained the Dais. But in the process, they understood how resilient the system was. And so even if there was like a government input into moving to the so-called more modern ways, people had more faith in these traditional dyes, obviously because they were from the community and knew them and etc. Lots of factors. But I think in the dye trainings that happened sometime in the 80s or 90s, I think there was also an exchange of a lot of knowledge and information, which was then interwoven into these intervention programs. I also am aware of certain trainings in the department in which we had done with UNICEF and other of these organizations, which were deep into the tribal areas of Gujarat, South Gujarat. And again, it was only when the two systems met that they could, engage in a dialogue. And so although the purpose was to change practices, some of the practices were understood hands-on and then integrated into these trainings, because otherwise, those trainings really were not received very well by the local people. So I think it was a win-win situation. Those were very important projects, I would say. But of course, like I have mentioned earlier, they become more like intervention projects and they never really get mainstreamed into theory. And I think that is
that's what I was really, that's what I was asking. Because I know also that in Orissa, there's a friend of mine called Devjit who passed away during COVID. He's done a lot of work with what he calls uncultivated foods, which is what you get from the forest.
Right.
And how children who eat those, but the mothers know what to give them.
Right.
Right. And those traditional knowledge systems are dying. And children who don't use that kind of food have nutritional problems.
Right, right.
So there's lots there. Hopefully in one generation, there'll be enough time for people like you to study it and bring it back.
Yeah, I think I would just simply reiterate to everyone, this is nothing new that I'm saying, but the fact that development is embedded in culture. Yes. You can't separate it. You can't keep looking for universals and ignoring the local, because if it has survived for so long, I think it has to make sense. Otherwise, why would it? If it was detrimental to health and longevity, why would it survive? You know, so I think it's common sense to understand it and then kind of intervene with your so-called theory or intervention or whatever.
No, I think what you said earlier is very important also, Rachna, to build this into theory.
Yes.
Understanding its importance in nutrition might be critical, because I'm sure you know the data about the nutritional deficiency issues, the issues that mothers and lactating mothers are having, and it's all because of white rice and non-nutritious food, while the traditional knowledge of what foods to use has always been there.
Right. I think in general, parenting, childcare, the pace at which it is quote unquote modernizing is almost scary.
Exactly.
Because we are not just losing very indigenous knowledge, we are also losing on basic, even urban practices, say a generation or two ago, of how to bring up children and all of that. And I think there is massive confusion when it comes to why is the child doing so and so. And there are all these integrated factors. What are they eating? What are they listening? What are they engaging with? Both parents and children. And so I think there is huge scope to do so much more in India about this, thanks to our diversity and these little pockets of knowledge.
Yeah. So I just wanted to ask you about the work you've done with Parikrama. That's another very interesting thing, because these are things that rarely get into an academic context, nah?
Right.
So if you can share a little bit about that, that'll be nice, Rachna.
Yeah, thank you. I think, like I said, I was married into a family with the Datta Parampara, and so the river Narmada is of high significance because including Shankaracharya and a lot of wise saints, they have, they've engaged with the river in a very meditative way. And I think it goes way back into our civilization to say that the river really is, the source of all life. and
Yeah.
it is sacred. And so although the idea that it is sacred is not alien to us, what we do to the river or continue doing to it is something far removed. And so I happened to listen to Bhageshri Trivedi, who is recently finished her doctoral work in English, and I had shared her talk with you also some time back.
Yeah.
And how she could talk of selfhood and transformation and the parikrama around the river. And so I was quite fascinated by that topic, and I'd already finished another study on Bhavyatras, which was also about a journey. But I think the Narmada Parikrama presented itself as a very fascinating experience, undertaken voluntarily, whether there was a cultural practice and a divine association with it. I think in my research, I also found a lot of urban, highly educated, modern, so-called westernized people also undertake it and talk about transformation, sustainability, and a lot of these factors. So I think it also resonated very well with me in terms of looking at human development not as a linear journey from point X to point Y, but like in the Indic tradition, as a evolving spiral, where you move from one place.
That's right.
No, you come back to the same place, but then you move to another plane. And so that idea was really very fascinating for me. I recently presented it to a Western audience in Ireland, and I think it was so well received because they could understand the idea of remaining in an eternal parikrama. And I think that also expands our view of human development, not from just life to death, but of infinite possibilities.
That's right.
Not just in this life, but I mean, if you, depending on your belief, you could stretch it to so much more. And the fact that human potentials can be infinite, I think that in itself becomes a foundation for understanding human development. And so
there are similar things, Rachana, no, in other places. But what I found fascinating in that paper is also the way people respond to these, the people who take the pilgrimage,
right.
They go with nothing. So they have to depend on the generosity of people, the Atithi Devo Bhava concept, the pleasure with which they serve these people on a parikrama. I think these are all extremely important aspects. Now, what is your understanding in your study of these cultural aspects? Now,
yeah. So if I mean, and I have very limited understanding of the parikrama itself. I've understood it only from the perspective of the experiences of my participants and what I have heard so far. So yes, there is a cultural structure around it, but there is also a very sharp, very focused ecology that enables the parikrama.
Correct.
And so this involves people from remote villages who live in abject poverty, tribals who are basically taking care of that area around the Narmada River in more than 3 states. And the Parikramavasi goes, there are rules to follow. So you can't cross the river, you have to eat this, not eat this, number of things. And it's up to each one to decide their own rules and structures. But I think there is a whole system that supports the Parikrama. Right. People are welcomed, they are fed just by virtue of being Parikramavasis.
That's
and,
right.
There is so much respect and atmiyata for them because people understand their roles way beyond themselves to say that my life has to be of use to this Parikramavasi in completing their idea or their role. And I think there couldn't be a more dharmic explanation to life than this, that make your life productive and useful to society. Interestingly, what it also brings up through some of my participants is their idea of sustainability. So, many of them were into businesses with chemicals and this and that, and they have given up all of that.
Wow.
And changed their entire work profile, because they said that eventually the work that I'm doing is ending up polluting the river that I have circumambulated, and so my parikrama will be useless if I continue to do what I'm doing. I think that's a huge shift.
That's brilliant. That's really dharmic decision making, na, Rachna?
Exactly. And people, of course, there are also people who finish the parikrama and quietly slip back into life as is. So to each one their own. But I think both the Bhavyatra and the parikrama are contexts of development to slow down, to reflect, to see what you're doing, and to enable dharmic thinking in your own way. And please be also reminded that it was not just Hindus who took up the parikrama. Anybody could do it from any walk of life. Although the majority of people who do it are Hindus because they are well anchored into this understanding, and that's you know, that's the way it is. But I think this is fascinating as a developmental context. People have done parikramas with children, families. There are sampradayas who do it regularly, and so this is a lot of knowledge happening right next to us.
That's right.
We
That's
should
right.
be able to document it
That's right.
systematically. Yeah.
And I guess this is more moral and ethical than anything you can think of in a
Yes,
classroom and
right.
belting it down to people, na?
Because, you know, it boils down to some very common terms like seva. What is it?
Exactly.
What is service? What is to be of service to others?
Yeah.
You know, and that in itself can create a melting of your
Absolutely.
all these layers of ego that you have. And I think everybody should have at least some service experience. I mean, so anybody who offers this kind with this mindset is in an eternal parikrama. And so you're constantly evolving and developing. And so without
right.
this kind of reflexivity, I don't know what kind of development are we talking about.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, one of the interesting things that Krishnamacharya would say is that you cannot be a yogi without traveling to lands and meeting people you don't know. And that he didn't mean that as going in an aeroplane and going for a tourist trip, nah? To actually go and exactly like the parikrama you're talking about, to go there and to have to depend on their generosity for you to live.
Yeah, immersion.
And what it teaches you about yourself and about the world around.
Right, right.
Yeah, and even in small stints I've had in villages, nah? Going there, living with those people, it is so humbling.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because whatever little they have, they share without a question.
Yeah. And so that clarity is something that has become so unavailable to us.
Exactly.
And I think such programs, we also have a program where we send our undergraduate students to live with salt pan workers. Water is scarce. And so this has been a very, very rewarding program for us.
Yes.
I mean, you see students sensitized and changed. Of course, some of these experiences are very important in higher education.
Exactly.
Also because what has affluence done to us? You know, that is again a question that I hold. What has affluence done to our humanity, our understanding of each other? The world is
and the environment. And the environment.
Yeah, and the environment. And we are still going to war. I mean, read the newspapers today and there's something happening in Israel. And so how much more of a destruction will you require to understand what it takes to live? And so unless we expose young people to alternative ways, which was at some point the way of living.
I was just saying, what alternative way? Where is that? This is the alternative that is
this is the mutation that we have ended up with.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is important to understand, to expose. And the humbling is something that we require in a large supply.
Yeah. There are some questions.
I think so.
I'd rather open it out if it was possible.
Sure.
Because, you know, nothing like having, like Aditi has a question. There's a Rajalakshmi who has a question. I don't know. Amit, can you enable them to come on screen or in some way ask the question directly?
Sure, sir.
And I would suggest that you don't just ask the question and disappear. Yeah,
okay.
Have a chat so that Rachna can answer you fully.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Because this, I don't think Rachna or I enjoy learning something from a pulpit and walking away. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think any learning happens in that mode.
Yeah, I was
Got
just telling a student recently that the mind requires a sangha
Exactly.
in order to remain fruitful and fertile. And so I think it's up to a lot of academicians to build those spaces which are shrinking, unfortunately. And so, yeah, there's a lot that can be done together. And I'd love to connect with people. So please reach out to me. You can, I'll share my email towards the end. And of course, Raghuji is available very easily on the internet.
So actually, Aditi M asks a question. Great question by
Anindita Banerjee asked a question before that, Amit. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, instead of reading it out, is it possible for them to have a chat with Rachna?
Yeah, can they come on screen basically and ask their question? I think that's what he's suggesting.
The structure of
one
this,
moment,
you and I are the experts and we're talking down to people.
Yeah, no. That is not required.
That's the way this is structured.
Yeah, that's scary.
Yeah, it's scary for me.
Because some of the questions are
possible, Amit?
I'm still trying to figure it out. So may not be possible, but maybe they can reply in the same section again.
No. Then I'll just read out the question. Anindita Banerjee had a question, which is, how well is autoethnography accepted in indigenous research in Indian knowledge systems from a PhD point of view in India?
Yeah, I think an autoethnography is something that I've always wanted to do, and I think that is very much required. First-person experiences. We've always talked about this, even in philosophy. And so I think I would bank a lot on qualitative methods. That is also something that we require to basically fill in the gaps, bring in more cultural knowledge, make it available, the frameworks. Because, how do you validate that? I can have a very lay understanding of dharma and karma, and it may not be radically different from what is in the scriptures. Now, how did this happen? We need to build those bridges. So I think qualitative research, autoethnographic research, most welcome. I think Indian knowledge systems are geared very well to accommodate some of these methods. We've always maintained that, right, Raghuji?
Yeah. And one of my friends, Puneet, actually went through a whole process of living with.
Sorry to interrupt, Raghuji. I think Anindita Banerjee is able to speak.
She's here. Sure, we can see her. Yeah.
So, Pranam,
Puneet went through living experience of going back, living traditionally for a few years. So I'm sure it is. Yes, Anindita.
Yeah. Anandita.
And ma'am, first of all, Pranam. So I'm a researcher from Mumbai. My guide is Dr. Ajinkya Naware from SP Jain. So what usually is our issues when I am working, my topic is Krutagnata, trying to understand Indic perspective of gratitude. So we all know gratitude, but I am working on Krutagnata from IKS. So when I come for IKS conferences, the Sangha understands it there. People who are well versed with indigenous constructs understand it. However, when I am trying to attend an APS or I'm trying to, write in a journal, I get major rejections. And I even get comments when I'm talking about or delving into the Indian concept of self, of Jagat and Jiva. I get comments like, you are just giving gyan. And that kind gets very morally disturbing for few days and then gear up. While I read so much of work from when I come for the IKS conferences, then going back to that in a state university gets a little difficult. So how should I deal, or how did you deal with it, ma'am?
Yeah, so I have been telling Raghuji to bring out a journal interdisciplinary perspectives on Indic wisdom or whatever.
We'll do it
Yeah,
very soon. Yeah.
Yes, I completely empathize with you, Anandita. There are, well, the way I have done it is also approach good Indian journals, some of them which are there. So you will have to have the discretion to see where will you get good reviewers, people who will, I think Psychology and Developing Society, I've had a very good experience with them. So you will have to find your niche. So I think if you already have explored, and Ajinkya would definitely be able to help you through this. So yeah, there are, I think you were also in touch with Professor Bhavuk, if I'm not mistaken, to tell you about how to, the methodology of going into.
Yes, ma'am. So he's been mentoring me because I was very lost when I started with my research career last year. So sir has been mentoring me quite a lot.
Yeah,
and
so
I've been reading him.
Yeah, no, I think don't lose hope. Go to journals which will understand you. And I think because you're just 1 or 2 years into your PhD, also take some time to, share your papers or drafts of them with different people who are well anchored in Indian psychology. I think you will get good feedback for improving. And I do understand that one can feel lost because you're literally left with neither of the worlds. Neither are you fully into IKS, nor are you fully going Western, Euro-American. So yeah, the struggle is real. I empathize, but don't give up hope is what I would say. And when you go to conferences, build your community.
Thank you so much.
If I may just add to what Rachna ji is saying, one of the things that we are having to deal with, I think in all of this Indic work, is that words are translated completely wrongly. Yeah, like Shilpa ji and I are just involved right now in writing a paper which is contradicting some Western research that says a deep state of nirvikalpa samadhi is cessation of consciousness. Now, this statement is so wrong because you have, first of all, defined consciousness wrongly. And in Indic text, it's very, very clear that what you're stopping are what in technical terms would be called chitta vritti. And consciousness is chit, not chitta. So where do you start? So we need to really build a whole taxonomy. We need to really re-anchor these key words in their original Shastric meaning, which luckily is not very difficult because all these Sanskrit words can be broken down into their original root meanings and then built back into something which can be explained. Yeah, and many of them are not just words. This word is a whole concept. It's a whole worldview. So we have to work hard, yeah. All of you who are committed to the Indic knowledge systems have to help us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Can we go to Rajalakshmi? Rajalakshmi Sriram has a question on how knowledge is constructed and passed on. Why don't you ask the question, Rajalakshmi? Yeah, Anindita can go off air.
Got it.
Amit bhai?
Got it.
Yeah.
So Rajalakshmi ji, you can speak now.
Actually, it was not major question. I was just thinking of how do we build this community and take it further. And I think, like Rachna was saying, everything is about a whole system of higher education. When we come to learn, how do we become really humble learners? And this begins with the people who are facilitating learning. So Rachna is still young and she has a very bright future. And there may be, I thought, other people who are in that category who are going to steer systems of higher education. So I was just thinking, what are some basic, I don't even say principles, some kind of mindset with a built-in view of the parikramik yogi as a teacher or as a facilitator that can be developed so that this eternal process of reflexive learning continues in the facilitator as well as the learner.
Rajlakshmi ji, you're triggering one of my deep angst. No, I keep joking with Rachna ji about it. No, see, earlier in India, the proof was finally not the academician but the practitioner.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm sure you know about this. Now we learnt about pi because somebody had to construct a Yajna Kunda which had the same perimeter between a circle and a square. So the construction was the final proof. Today we've got into a context where the practitioner becomes the informed, or what's the term, Rachana? Some native informer.
Yeah, native informant, participant.
So this is another issue. I think Indian knowledge systems have to bring back this deep connection between practice and theory.
Thank you.
I don't know how academic
development
institutions will do this. No,
human
some of you have to help us
development
with this.
Human development is a very, very fertile discipline for that, and we're striving. Good luck, Rachna.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. She happens to be my teacher, so I don't think I have
thought so.
answers. But I think I know where the question is coming from, because yeah, she's very well aware of the systems within which we have to function. And yeah, the humility, of course, is one's own question. So I think my research has always humbled me more and more, rather than said, oh, I have so many publications, blah, blah, blah. I think my work with Gandhians was extremely humbling, because they were not making a noise about anything. And they were living a life which to me was rather unimaginable. I did have the courage.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that the Nait Talim and all that was triggered by them has not been followed, no? And some other education system has taken root in us. No?
Yeah. And I think one big trouble that we are having nowadays, very early on with teachers, is that they feel students are so and so. And that's a very rigid way of looking at them. Because it is also, according to me, a reflection of you are so and so. We need to melt this away, otherwise there is no way forward.
Yeah.
And so the arrogance is something that the system is breeding, and we really need to be very aware of it. I'll just share a little example. So the other day I had gone to a botanical garden, and there was a student who was from a tribal background, and he had so much more to tell me.
Absolutely.
And so I almost felt like telling him, don't waste your time in doing this PhD, whatever, but just document all of this, go back home, and I think you are through, So yeah, this is where we stand. And I'm sure by the time he finishes his PhD, I don't know what worldview he will carry back, and I hope it's less damaging than what we see these days. So yeah. This is where we are. Thank you, Raji ma'am.
There is a kind of a question from Aditi. I don't know. Are diyas really like midwives, or are their roles very different?
The dais.
Dai.
Yeah, the dais were like midwives. So they were then eventually trained with some, medical knowledge to become, they then became more or less certified, trained midwives. But yeah, they were the indigenous version of a midwife. Yeah.
Yeah, in my understanding, I've done a little bit of work on this with Dr. Girija, kind of talked to her about it. There were only 3 or 4 key things. Now, fundamentally, midwives were not only at the birth time, but helping the mother through the pregnancy. Yeah, helping them to eat the right food, suggesting, actually they knew certain kinds of massage techniques for the mother. And they also had I think they'd learned some simple exercises if they had met Ayurvedic people and so on. They would do this. And also she said the only thing they needed to be taught was to use a fresh new blade to cut the umbilical cord. Everything else they were pretty good at. Yeah, but I guess you have to talk to people who really worked with them.
I think now I don't even know how many of them are left.
Yeah.
I think that's also something to understand.
Yeah, just as Ayurveda has become a subordinate system to allopathy, this also has become a subordinate system, which is actually not a very good thing because we don't have enough doctors in any case.
Yeah.
And just really honoring the dais would have made a huge difference. I've lost touch with this. I don't know where it's at now. Yeah, Kiran Kumar Allah he just said there's a great exchange. We've come so far removed from our humanity and our potential.
Thank you.
Then Chaya, how to address the problem of implementing right child development knowledge to I think it's common people of this nation. All yours, Rachana.
Yeah, sorry. So are you referring to Kiran Kumarji's?
Kiran Kumar's is just a comment, nice comment. Thank you, Kiran. Kiran's a friend, so.
Oh, okay.
There's no question here unless he has a question.
Yeah, so I think you're referring to Chaya Bhise's question.
Yeah, Chaya's.
How to address the problem of implementing right child development knowledge.
That's right.
Comments.
That's right.
Yeah. I think we also need to understand what is right child development knowledge. Much of what is taught is, of course, it comes from a certain tradition. It will give you developmental milestones and all. But along with that, it's also important to understand why people believe what they believe in. And I think that opens a lot of doorways. And now we know enough to medical advancement and all in terms of what practices would enable child development and what would restrict it. And so I think we need to, move away from this compartmentalization of this is traditional and so, it's not relevant anymore and we need something new to. So I think those, and it is not possible without dialogue. I see a lot of intergenerational conflict between grandparents and young parents happening, how to raise the child. And I think one very clear idea would be to discuss or talk about it is to say what is in the best interest of the child. What kind of a person would you want this child to become? What capabilities do you want that child to have? And so I have also realized that we don't have open discussions in the family. Everybody is just mired in their own ideological position, throwing out the other. We are not a civilization like this. We are a civilization of openness, courage, and dialogue. And so if we can start with the family, I think the right knowledge will also emerge. Otherwise at the click of a button, everything is available on the internet. You don't have to do much, and of course,
much of it is wrong knowledge, na, Rachna?
Yeah, meaning what I'm trying to say is that there are child development as a field has come a long way. Pediatricians know what they are talking about in that sense. So there is less of a chance for you to go grossly wrong over anything. I think what we are fussing over are small, tiny little things that can be just resolved by, understanding or talking more. I also feel that the field of child development, human development requires its due because a lot of this interdisciplinary talk, a lot of our expertise that should be grounded in culture has not really reached an audience, So I think that is also partly why we are facing some of these issues. So yeah, there is a lot that the field can offer in itself, provided it is grounded in culture and realities, social realities.
Can I just add something to this, Rachana ji?
Sure,
See,
sure, of course.
In Indian thought, the individual is not the unit of discussion and whatever. The family has always been the unit of discussion. Now, one of the issues I think that comes up is because we're starting to think in ways that are muddled. Yeah, our cultural practices are all saying in what culture does a child grow? Exactly what you're saying, na? What's the context and in which this child is growing? But today's knowledge systems are all focusing on individual, right? So any thoughts on that?
I think this is so important because the moment we are engaged with the individual alone, we are basically throwing away the context. In what context is the individual embedded? Those two are rather inseparable. They make each other up, And so I think this is also one of the things that Euro-American perspectives have done, to look at the individual, to look at autonomy, to look at it in a linear manner, to look at reason over emotion, science versus religion. So all of these binaries in some way are contributing to the understanding of the individual in isolation. And that is not helping at all. So I think that is some place that we need to really be moving away from. So, yes, the individual is important, but the individual is also connected. You can't remove that connection away. And it's not that Western scholars have not talked about it. There is fascinating work by Carol Gilligan, who says, you've always talked about autonomy. Women are constantly developing through connection. They are the ones who are keeping connections. Why are you sidelining them? And likewise, a lot of work by Vandana Shiva on ecofeminism,
right.
The understanding the feminine per se, not the female, but the feminine is just so strong in our culture. I think it's time that we started paying attention to all of that. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
I just completed a 5-day exploration or intense immersion into the idea of Shringara. And the key word there is Rati, that there is no individual actually, they're all moving towards this meeting with each other. The idea of an individual makes you an isolate and not somebody who's constantly in a culture and together creating a reality. Yeah. There's this question from Smriti Juneja.
Yeah.
As a lay person, which texts or courses do you suggest to gain insights into Indian ancient philosophy?
Yeah, I think Bori, like Bhandarkar Institute, is one such. I think they have put up a lot of their courses online. There is also so much happening in different colleges. I think IIT Kharagpur has put up a whole repository of Indian knowledge from different traditions. So I think there are a lot of faculty development programs.
Indic has also got a lot of short courses. Indica?
Absolutely. Indica is doing wonderful.
Quite a lot of good work.
They've put on so much content, plus over and above that, a lot of courses that happen off and on. So in different parts of the country. So I think that's also important to just reach out to them and do that. So yeah, number of these things are already there, already available. So I hope I've answered your question, Smriti ji.
The next is also an interesting question, Rachana ji.
Yeah.
Doesn't dharma also mean duty? Duty towards oneself, mostly toward the self. Dharma today is more for personal gratification than parachinta Parasukha, in your research, can you enumerate what is the impact of parikrama on some of your respondents? Can I just
Yes,
give you a
yes.
nudge and then you take on this thing?
Sure. No, you are the dharma expert. Go ahead. Yeah,
I'm not.
I would love to
listen. Yeah. See, just to break it down, whoever this anonymous attendee is, now this is what scares me. Yeah. I wish that this person could be on so that we could have a quick chat. See, the word dharma comes from dharati iti dharma. Dharati means to sustain, yeah, and one of the most fundamental meanings of the word dharma is it will regenerate that which is fallen. It will reinstate that which is falling and nourish that which is standing. Yeah, so these actions constitute dharma. Okay, now the word dandam is actually what is used in Sanskrit to mean duty. And in creating a cultural context, they put three words together as an equilateral triangle. Dharmam, dandam, and mukti. So the context that Rachnaji was talking about, if it has to be a really nourishing context for a person, ought to have these three aspects. Right? It should have dharmam so that there is nourishment of the individual, of the context, and so on. Right? Dandam means those rules, like you might use the English word duty for that, which will help a good conduct in a group. Like, for example, that's why they say ahimsa paramo dharmaha. And then there are ways in which that ahimsa is supposed to be followed in each age, which becomes dandam. The way these two are practiced has to enable I don't know what the English parallel for mukti would be. Mukti does not mean your final thing. Mukti means an inner freedom or autonomy or whatever that is, so that I develop in a way that will further my personal evolution according to my swabhava and my genius. That's what the word means. So when you translate it into the English word duty, I think people are bringing in a Victorian idea of duty, which is an imposition of the outside on to the person's actions. I think it was very useful to use this definition during the colonial period. I think it's time to get out of this definition. Because dharma as a question, am I really enlivening myself, you, and the context simultaneously, is a brilliant question to ask. And it will differ in different contexts. You ought to have the ability to enter that difficult question and answer it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Raghuji, for setting the context. So I think the other part of the question is about the parikrama. So like Raghuji said, this whole idea of swadharma, something that emanates from yourself, you need to be able to reflect on it. And what are you, unless you are in a relationship with things and people around you, right? So that understanding of swadharma also happens when you have this kind of an isolated, quiet time during the parikrama to reflect on some of these things, So I think these contexts were purposely, fitted in the cultural, milieu, so that people would have time to reflect. So, when the Bhudan movement ended, Vinoba took a sabbatical. He said, okay, successful or not is not the concern. It is time to introspect. So today we don't have time for anything, and so we keep on making errors on a loop. We are not reflecting, we are not thinking why we are doing what we are doing. And so I think this whole element of swadharma, this whole understanding of who am I, why am I in connection, what should I be doing, all of those you simply don't reach to that level to engage with those questions. And so there is so much dukkha, there is just so much of suffering and so much of frustration in every bit. And so I think the indigenous knowledge systems also empower us to say, look, wait, reflect. I mean, all of our learning, without nididhyasana, without chintan, manan, it's not going to help you. You are not going to learn anything new. But if you're going to impose a structure saying, okay, iske baad ye, I have to be, ticking boxes and be in the hustle, God help the miserable you what to do, So that is where we are. That is, and so obviously by any standard, this is not developmentally appropriate or helping anybody. And so why the systems or the older systems are relevant is because of the essence of it, but just by the virtue of understanding the term dharma, we understand that it's not an imposition. It's not aligning with society. I mean, I don't think we've ever had this self versus society understanding at all, which many, like even in Freudian theory, it's always the self which is against society. And I think that's so restrictive, almost unhealthy, So, yeah, there are more questions, I think.
Yeah, there's one from Manya. We have about 10 minutes, Rachnaji.
Yeah.
So that might be something you can help out on. MA in Psychology, Organization Behavior, University. Yeah. If Manya reaches out to me, I can share some work that I've done in organization behavior on the ground. Yeah. Not theoretical, but on the ground.
Yeah. So
any reflections from you?
Yeah, no, we are also experimenting, and one of my doctoral students is going to develop a small module which will look at work-life balance from an Indic yogic lens. So I will also be reaching out to you again. So, but yeah, I think there is a lot of scope to make workplaces less toxic and more enlivening. So more power to you. Go ahead, reach out, connect to people, and I think we'll come up with something very, very fruitful and interesting.
Aditi is asking a big question, Rachnaji. How is mind understood in your work?
Wow. Okay. Is that a good...
As our view of Manomaya Kosha is so different from the Western context.
Yeah.
Whatever,
no, I think
right.
I have not engaged as such with the mind. I mean, the research has not been constructed saying, okay, now I'm going to study the mind, so to speak. But yes, the engagement with the Panchakoshas has been very, very enlightening in the sense that how people process their emotions, how they understand their roles and responsibilities, how they negotiate in day-to-day life or look at moral questions. I think that has been very enlightening to say that I think the Indian way of thinking and processing challenge, especially social challenges, in order to maintain harmony is something that is very intriguing, to say that we are not taking extremes. We want to resolve the problem amicably so as to not ruffle feathers, and it comes across almost from a Western point of view to say that, oh, but that's like, not really listening to your voice or some such thing. But if you contextualize it, you also understand that people value these relationships. They have to function in this context, and they would like to function in an amicable manner, not really ruffling feathers and, disrupting social harmony. So whether it was questions of gender equality or questions of, authority or whatever else, I think people were very wise to say, I will look at all my options, I will see, I will negotiate, I will let go if it maintains a certain social harmony. And it was not just, I will give up because I am forced to give up or some such. I think so. The understanding of autonomy, agency, all of this also needs to be deconstructed, reconstructed from an Indian perspective. And there is a lot that has been done already. We need to lean on to those frameworks and kind of structure them more into models that can be of use in future. So yeah, that's what I would.
Yeah, can I just add a small
Yes,
thing?
yes, please
We
go
go
ahead.
back to the initial thing, like the question when I'm an individual is, what's in it for me?
Yeah.
The question, if I'm dharmic, is what's in it for me and you and the context. So the primary question of how I approach something is different. Therefore, the entire process will be different. Now, if I study a process that is based on a holistic question through an individualistic lens, you're going to criticize it. You'll never be able to understand it. Yeah, so that's why we need to really construct a whole different way of looking at these things. Nah? Kiran has come back again, yeah, with another question. What would be a couple of domains of research in your wish list that could be done in areas of school, education, teacher? This comes up in almost every dialogue, Rachanaji. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it has to be, we can only suggest something and somebody else at some other level has to take it up, no? So what are your thoughts?
I think if we look at the teacher and empower the teacher to look at herself as a reflective, strong being, autonomous also in many ways, because inside the classroom, I mean, you are not a meek person. You have to be a reflective, strong person. I think we have broken the spine of teachers in this country.
Absolutely.
And that is why we are where we are. I have no qualms saying this because, we've become a meek community and that has not helped us. And that is because we have somehow made teaching as the least priority. Anybody can do it, but all of us are reflective beings as such, with or without these degrees and all of it. And so if you are, don't you hear stories of teachers in villages and teachers who are so well revered, even outside the formal, educational front. So like Raghuji was saying, the practitioner is the teacher and the teacher really needs to move into practice of education. And so we need to kind of just understand ourselves better as a reflective being. And I think a lot will. So, the teacher Swadharma, for example,
absolutely
is least studied. And that is something that we must perhaps take up in future.
Yeah, there's Bhageshree's comments, I think we agree with.
Yeah.
And hey, thanks for being around, Ashish. Ashish ji has asked a question.
Okay.
Way forward is juxtaposition and synthesis of knowledge creation. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
That's why all of us are here, from IITs and so on and so forth, and then going back to reintegrate and understand and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I quite liked what Shilpa ji recently mentioned, Shilpa Pandit ji. She said we must first become Vishwamitras and then get on to the Vishwa Guru thing. So first unless we have this mitrata above and beyond these boundaries, I think there is no Vishwa Guru waiting to happen. So,
yeah.
Thank you.
There are other things. Bhageshri again said it's good that we are looking at translation.
Yeah.
Ashish Bangaonkar, any relative of yours, Rachna?
Yeah, happens to be my husband. Thank you.
How can we create Narmada flow in the corporate world so that we can get similar experience of parikrama? Oh my God.
That's for you.
Big question, yeah.
Yeah.
Big question. I've been trying to answer it all my life, Ashish ji. I can share with you. I don't know how to answer it right now. I can only share the struggles. I think it's just an ongoing struggle. Yeah.
Thank you. So we have Somaya ji also.
See, I think one simple thing is, many of the family organizations I've worked with, have always invested in the society and in the corporate. So that there's a huge thing there to look at. And many of their ways of looking at business itself has a fundamental dharma about it, which is unfortunately not, so prominently looked at. It's getting lost also. But that is one starting point in my understanding. Vivek Garg, 2014, I'm hopping from variety of conferences, Kurukshetra, after economics, law, question, how can I move forward? Sanatani, Hindu, human, please guide me, method.
His learning. Okay. Yeah, I think he's done a lot, masters in Sanskrit. So
yeah, come and join us, yeah.
yeah.
Ashish, again, yes, I agree. There's no either or. The individual is the collective and the collective is the individual. My friend Mani saying, how can we develop space age?
Nice.
By sending them in an astronaut thing. And we're a family of 4 living globally. My first daughter is in France, second in Indiana. I can easily see. No, but there's a lot of movements going on in the West also for natural childbirth.
Yes, yes.
And there are people who've studied Indian childbirth methods who've taken it back to the US. Like, for example, making sure the childbirth happens in lukewarm water, same temperature as the body, and things like that. So there is a lot of work that's gone from studying the Indian systems. There was a French doctor who came, took a lot of photographs. I met him also in India long back when he came here. Phenomenal work he's done. Yeah, so there's a lot of work, Mani, all over.
I think there is a comment from Krishna Chaitanya.
Yes.
Whether there's a resurgence of Indic values or is it just that Indian Indologists?
In the case Indian Indologists have a mouthpiece. I wouldn't know, yeah? Do you have a view on that?
No, well, I mean, I don't know if it's resurgence in that sense. I mean, even if there is resurgence, if we understand where we are coming from and what we have as a heritage, I think the purpose is served. I wouldn't get social media into it because after all, that's another kind of Maya that we are engaging in, rather unnecessary, but yeah. I think Bhageshri has a question. Are there frameworks that exist that could be used to legitimize such knowledges and thus a lot of research? So what frameworks? Yeah.
That's for people like you to create, Rachna.
Yeah, I think even if we look at the existing frameworks like Dharma or Karma Yoga and embellish them, make them contemporary, I mean, relevant in contemporary times, I think the purpose is served. We don't need to reinvent structures and frameworks. There is a lot of work that is coming out from Indian knowledge systems. How do we make it like translational? How do we apply it? How do we make it useful to society? And I think this is uncharted space for innovation. So I think instead of latching on to an existing framework, which will have its own history, I think we latch on to now knowledge and see that it is contemporary, see that it is relevant. And I think we are still taking baby steps. So I think Bhageshri herself has made some wonderful contributions with her doctoral work in English literature. So
Super.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to pull Bhageshri into the
yes.
Taxonomy project.
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Bhageshri, for joining.
Yeah, how to translate key words so that they don't get lost.
Yes. I think that's all for it.
That's
and
it,
we've
yeah.
kind
That's
of,
it. It's
gone over.
exactly on the hour that we promised.
So
So thank you very much, Rachna ji. It was great.
thank you,
I had a
Raghuji.
lot of
Thank
fun.
you, everybody. Yeah. Yes, this was very, very engaging, and I think I had a great time just sharing my journey and talking about some of these challenges. So on a very optimistic note, I think I would ask everybody, one, thank you definitely for joining us today, and another, just look around. There is so much IKS happening in your own
Absolutely.
lives, in your own families. Let's just get on to what means the most
Honoring
to
it.
us. Yes,
Really
honoring
honoring it. Yeah.
with pride and with an understanding, with empathy and compassion. And I think we have a lot to offer to this world. So thanks again. Thank you, Raghuji.
Thanks
for
a lot,
for
Rachna.
this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
Amit,
Yeah, thank you, Amit.
and
Amitji
all the help from Indica.
from Indica.
Thank you so much.